I'm Lynn Roberts, and I'm the Associate Dean of Student Affairs and Alumni Relations here at the CUNY Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy. So glad to have you join us for our second annual Disability Awareness Month event. And this year we have a two-part series, and this is our first of those two events that we're very excited to present to you. And without further ado, I am going to introduce Jeanette Rodriguez, I believe, who is going to provide an overview of all that we have happening at the Office of Accessibility Services. So welcome, Jeanette.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Dean Roberts. Thank you to the Planning Committee for putting this together. Thank you to the interpreters, John and Destiny, and of course to all the speakers that will speak today. And to all of you who are joining us today, I thank you as well. Your decision to register and actually be here with us today and attend this event titled Forging Pathways Towards a Better Informed and Accessible CUNY SPH. It's definitely a step in the right direction. And we hope to have more of these events and have you attend a second and third and fourth time. So I'd just like to quickly share my screen to show you where on the website you would go if you're a student and you're interested in learning more about registration. So here's the main page. You go to students, student services. Just give that a second. You would just scroll down to office, and it'll take you right to the Office of Accessibility Services page. And so here you'll learn more about how to register. There are forms that you would have to provide the office with. And the most important form would be the medical documentation that you would have to, it would have to have a diagnosis on it. And of course, it would have to indicate what the accommodations are that your physician is requesting. CUNY does provide reasonable accommodations. So as long as it falls under the reasonable accommodation, we'll do our best to work with you. I'm so sorry. There's a knock on my door. This is terrible. Okay. So yeah, I do want to also advise you that, this threw me off a little bit, sorry, that the office is going through a transition. And so Sarah Ingram, who is the moderator for today, will be taking over. I'll be stepping down as disability coordinator, and Sarah will be taking over the role. And so Sarah and I have been working with each other for the past some months now, right, Sarah? And it's been a wonderful experience. She's great. And I encourage students to reach out. We have here the email where you can communicate with Sarah, accessibility@sph.cuny.edu. And that's where you should reach out to her for any details or an appointment if you need to schedule. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here with us today. Sarah, back to you.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Can somebody spotlight me? I can't spotlight myself. I don't know. Life with Zoom. Thank you, Dr. Roberts and Jeanette. No pressure about taking over, but thank you for paving the way, Jeanette, and for your guidance. And thank you so much, Dr. Roberts, for your leadership and support. And over the next couple of weeks, you'll both be hearing a lot from me. Okay, so hi. I am Sarah Ingram, she, her, the Student Disability Associate in the Office of Accessibility Services. Before we start, I first want to acknowledge what it took to get us in the Zoom, the organizers of the event and the student event on Thursday. Thanks to Dr. Roberts and Jeanette, and a special thanks to our student committee members, Zaire and Yvonne. And thank you to our IT support. Thank you, John, and to our interpreters today and the communications office for getting the word out. So again, welcome to CUNY Disability Awareness and the School of Public health events under the umbrella, building more accessible, inclusive, and braver spaces in the CUNY School of Public Health community. And today we're coming together, as Jeanette mentioned, to forge pathways toward a better and informed, accessible School of Public Health. So today and our Thursday student-only event, we're seeking to illuminate the challenges and opportunities for creating and sustaining a more accessible and supportive learning and working environment. And to do that, we're first going to watch a very short recorded segment from me and Mingus to ground our conversation, and then we'll hear from our speakers who will touch on how they contribute to more accessible School of Public Health. And then we'll open up for discussion. So Mia Mingus is a writer, educator, and trainer for transformative justice and disability justice. She's a queer, physically disabled Korean transracial and transnational adoptee raised in the Caribbean. She works for community, interdependence, and home for us all, not just some of us, and longs for a world where disabled children can live free of violence with dignity and love. As her work for liberation evolves and deepens, her roots remain firmly planted in ending sexual violence. I just want to remind people if they want to take a break to do so. And here's a couple of minutes of a fantastic talk from Mia Mingus. I'm going to do the whole share screen, can you see my screen, blah, blah, blah thing. So bear with me 1 second. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you so much. All right, here we go.
I don't just want technical and logistical access. I don't just want inclusion. I want liberatory access and access intimacy. I want us to not only be able to be part of spaces, but for us to be able to fully engage in spaces. I don't want us to get a seat at someone else's table. I want us to be able to build something more magnificent than a table together with our accomplices. Who says that tables are the only things? I want us to be able to be understood and to be able to take part in principled struggle together, to be able to be human together, not just placated or politely listened to. And I want this for us, and I want this from us. Because the moment we acknowledge intersectionality, it also means that we must acknowledge and face ourselves. Because even within this room and to all the folks out there on the live stream, there are many, many, many differences between us and between those that aren't even able to join us here. Some of us are immigrants, some of us are not. Some of us are survivors of sexual violence, some of us are not. Some of us benefit from light-skin privilege and/or white passing privilege, some of us do not. Some of us benefit from anti-Black racism or hearing supremacy or a world built for cis people. I want us to do our work so that when people whose oppression benefits us, when they share their truths or their questions, that we can meet them in those conversations, that we don't just listen to them, that we can join them in conversations about activism, strategy, action, accountability, and justice in principled struggle. Because these kind of spaces, like the one that we're in today, they often feel like tiny oases, right, in the middle of a desert, and that's incredibly real. And I would also like to offer that they can also serve as a microcosm of the world in which we currently exist, and to think of them as any safer than anywhere else is an illusion. I would like to offer that multiple truths can exist, and that one does not negate the other. This space can be both a welcome respite from the unrelenting storm that we are usually in, and it can also be a storm as well. When I say liberatory access, I mean access that is more than simply having a ramp or being sent free or providing captions. Access for the sake of access or inclusion is not necessarily liberatory, but access done in the service of love and justice and connection and community is liberatory and has the power to transform. I want us to think beyond just knowing the right things to say and be able to truly engage. I want us to not only make sure that things are accessible, but also work to transform the conditions that created that inaccessibility in the first place.
We'll follow up with this event with a link to the full talk. I highly recommend it. It is incredible, but I think this was a really good way for us to start, just to ground the discussion through a transformative justice lens. And before we start getting into the nitty gritty of providing access at the School of Public Health. So of course, this can mean extended time on tests or assignments, can also mean technology accessibility or providing reasonable accommodations in the environment. A note that I think we failed to mention is we have enabled captioning. So if you want captioning, hit that little CC at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And if you're having some trouble with that, chat to John in IT, and he should be able to walk you through it. So our speakers today, did Suraj join? I'll go ahead and introduce Suraj, but he may hop on a little bit later. So Suraj Ali is an assistive technology specialist from the CUNY Assistive Technology Services, also known as CUNY CATS. And because not only talking about accessibility for students, our own Director of Human Resources, Arthur, will walk us through some accommodations for staff. And then wrapping it all up, we can't talk about accessibility without talking about compliance of the law. So our own Sahana Gupta from CUNY SPH, the ADA and 504 coordinator will also join us. So if Suraj is here, we'll launch right into some tech that is available to CUNY campuses. If not, we'll move on to Arthur.
Hello, everyone. My name is Arthur McHugh. I'm the Director of Human Resources here at CUNY SPH. And as the director, I am the Accommodations Officer. I was asked to speak by both Sarah and Jeanette, and it's my pleasure. I'm here to address basically our employees, and I'm willing to help anyone else who needs it as well. As the Accommodations Officer, if an employee has an issue at work that an accommodation can make their job easier and better, we as the School of Public Health try our best to offer that to people. Now, it's a somewhat easy process. I have an open door policy. Any employee can shoot me an email, come see me in the office when I'm there. There are some papers to fill out. Might require a doctor's signature or a diagnosis. But once I receive that paperwork, we as a school do the best that we can to accommodate all employees. I know that there's an undue hardship rule here at CUNY, whereas if an accommodation causes an undue hardship, it can't be, or it's harder to do, and we look to scale it back. But nothing has happened to that extent. Employees come to me, usually behind a closed door. I give them the paperwork. I explain the process to them. They return the paperwork to me, and then we go about initiating that process. It can be something as small as a slight change in schedule to accommodate them, or perhaps they need a standing desk. I've had that request several times because our employees are unable to sit for a long period of time, or some of our employees. Again, the person has to self-disclose and they have to ask. So we provide an environment where the employee is comfortable. We speak one-on-one, and everything is kept as confidential as possible to achieve the accommodation. And should anyone need an accommodation, please feel free to reach out to me. Shoot me an email, come see me in the office. I'm usually there Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And we can talk about whatever's needed and work on getting it done. Does anybody have any questions for me?
We can take questions after.
Okay.
Yeah, but we'll let people brew.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that, Arthur. That was fantastic.
You're welcome, Sarah.
And I think it's really important to remember that staff and faculty are entitled to accommodations too. So yeah, thank you again. And to bring it together, we'll hear from compliance on the compliance and Sahana Gupta. With that, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, and good afternoon to everyone who is here today. Excuse me. As Jeanette and Arthur have talked about their areas of responsibility, which is basically, for the students, and then Arthur, who manages the employee accommodations. As the ADA 504 coordinator for the school, I look at the compliance with the CUNY policy that oversees and basically provides the directions and the guidelines for the Office of Accessibility Services with Jeanette, and then, subsequently very soon, Sarah will be overseeing, and Arthur, who looks after the HR side of things for our employees. So I just want to mention that, let me share my screen so that you can look at the main policy, which is basically that the CUNY's policy talks about providing reasonable accommodations and academic adjustments to allow everybody the opportunity to participate in their programs, the academic programs, any co-curricular programs, any activities, events that we have, anything like this, for example, as well as in the workplace for their employment. This policy addresses the procedures that both the offices of Accessibility Services and Human Resources follow. And so, the implementation is done by those two offices, and I oversee that in terms of the compliance and if there are any issues. So as we talked about it, as the Chief Diversity Officer and the ADA 504 coordinator, I'm responsible for ensuring that the accommodation requests by students are processed according to the policy. Jeanette and now Sarah will be looking at all of the guidelines and the directives that this policy provides. And they will then make sure that any requests are done according to the policy. And we are extremely flexible and accommodating, and always look to provide the best kind of service that our students need. The same with our employees. Any request for accommodation, as Arthur mentioned, is always seen with a view to flexibility, adaptability, and help and support for every person who makes that request. In the event that there are any appeals, for example, if there is one part of a request for accommodation that may not be met, and Arthur mentioned the undue hardship, those can come to me for mediation and or an investigation into the reasons for denial. And then I look at that as a case that needs to be investigated. We look at the underlying conditions, situation, and come up with a reasonable response that is more supportive of the person making the request. We are always, as a school, looking to provide that kind of support to our students as well as our employees. Included in this is, in my role, is also compliance on an annual compliance basis. I have to provide the data to the university. And so every year in the affirmative action plan, which is published on our website, you will find information about the 504 ADA compliance and what we have been doing to make sure that we are implementing the university policy in the best way possible in supporting our students. On another note, as the Title IX coordinator, there may be accommodations that are based on the individual's status as a victim of domestic violence, sex offense, or stalking, and or there may be complaints that need to be looked at in terms of any appeals that a student may have been denied or an employee may have been denied based on pregnancy, childbirth, or a related medical condition. Those come to me as the Title IX coordinator only if there is a denial and there is a request for an investigation or mediation. So the reasonable accommodation is assessed individually. As Jeanette mentioned and Arthur mentioned, each case is handled on a case-by-case basis. And it's also looked at in terms of what the circumstances are, what the reasons are, and what kind of accommodation we need to provide to the student or the employee. And each of them work very diligently and with great care to make sure that the support that is being requested is given to either the student or to the employee. So academic adjustments talk about modifying academic requirements, ensuring that examinations for students with disabilities reflect the achievement in the course. They make sure that the qualified student is not excluded from the but because of there is an absence of any educational aids or any technology aids that the student may need, and that in no way do we limit the participation of any person who's requesting an accommodation from participating fully in either their coursework or their workplace in their employment. These are some of the, kind of the foundational guidelines for the policy, and both the offices of accessibility services and human resources, they carry out the implementation, making sure that we are in compliance. So reasonable accommodation can be of many kinds. The first one that comes to mind is usually based on disability. You could have an accommodation based on pregnancy, childbirth, or a medical condition related to pregnancy or childbirth. You could have an accommodation based on religious practice. And as I mentioned before, you could also have an accommodation that is related to the status as a victim of domestic violence, sex offense, or stalking. Again, there may be need for documentation. There may be need for specific documentation in certain instances, and all of this remains confidential with both offices and only shared on a need-to-know basis. One of the things that I want to point out here is that no faculty member may request medical documentation or the reason for the accommodation, just as a supervisor or manager may not request the same from their staff person. So both of these issues are handled with great confidence by both the Office of Accessibility Services as well as by Arthur in HR. If there is undue hardship, and I know that Arthur mentioned the standing desks that are fairly common now, but if there is a undue hardship, which sometimes could be a fundamental alteration of the course curriculum, or there could be a fundamental alteration of the work that the person is expected to do, those then become a matter of discussion. And we would review those on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the CUNY policy is and what the state, federal, state, and city laws provide, and what CUNY SPH can do to best support that person, that individual. So undue hardship, I just want to give a little bit of an example, is an action that would require significant difficulty or expense. So as I said, the nature and the cost of accommodation in relation to the size and the resources. We are, SPH is in a leased, a high-rise building. In the event that, for example, the elevators are not working or there was need for a ramp, which we do not have control over, those kinds of issues become an undue hardship for the school. It doesn't happen usually in these kind of buildings, but if you go to a campus, for example, a sprawling campus where there may not be enough available ramps, or there are very old buildings with no elevators, or there are front steps going up like a stoop, those kinds of issues could become undue hardship. But then the Office of Accessibility, the Office for Student Services and HR would work with that person to make sure that some kind of accommodation is provided to them. So, as I said, while undue hardship is given as a reason for thinking it over or reviewing it further, most of the time colleges and the two offices work very, very closely together to make sure that any kind of support needed is provided. So in the event that there is a denial of any service, students may appeal those determinations, and they can file a disability accommodation appeal with my office. They can file a disability accommodation denial based on pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical condition with my office. Religious accommodations as well with my office. And if it is accommodations that's denied because they are a victim of domestic violence, sex offense, or stalking, they can appeal to, I believe it's the Office for Student Services, but I think it is Dean Roberts who would be addressing those complaints. And just providing to you the three main contact information. Jeanette, as we know, is stepping down, so I have taken the liberty of adding Sarah in here, as she will be the contact person for the Office of Accessibility Services. So I end my sharing at this time, but I just want everybody to know that we are very serious about providing this information so that it's transparent and always available to all our students. It is included in every syllabi. In the syllabi template, we have made sure that the policy is available and that there is language that informs our students of where to go and what to do in the event that they need an accommodation. So I'll wait for questions till the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sahana. That was so informative and really great to sort of bring it all home. So that was like one big accessible gift to us. Before I let you go and before we open up for questions, remind me, you're also on the CUNY-wide Technology Accessibility Task Force. Can you just touch briefly on some of that work that you do in that group?
So I have just been appointed to the CUNY IT Accessibility Task Force since I just attended one meeting.
Okay.
But, one of the things that the Accessibility Task Force is looking at is basically accessibility in terms of, and that's something that is dear to my heart and project as well, is looking at accessibility in terms of documents and information that is available to our students and faculty and staff. So as we all know, we tend to produce a lot of documents. There are PDF files, there are forms that we produce that we think they are fillable, but a lot of it is really not accessible for some people who have a disability in terms of accessing those kinds of information. So my project on the IT Accessibility Task Force going forward will be to make sure that all forms that employees use for, applying to positions, getting hired, applying for any kind of leave or, whatever, paperwork that's required in the HR world. And also in the student side of the house, especially with the Accessibility Services Office. I know Jeanette has done an amazing job at making sure that all of the forms are fillable, electronically fillable, and are accessible. But as we produce more information, that is something that is going to be on our radar.
Absolutely fantastic. That's really great to hear. And we're lucky to have you in that group. And I think something else that I know is coming down the pipeline, and I think we may have some faculty in the Zoom right now who are doing the Blackboard Ally pilot. That is a very, very cool tool that will address some of what Sahana just spoke about accessible PDF documents, more specifically for faculty to provide to students. So it's a very exciting thing coming down the pike. So I want to open up the floor to discuss forging pathways towards a better informed and accessible school of public health. And I think we're kind of doing that right now, in essence, by just having this as a platform. But really, what else could that look like? And I also want to mention that this event right now is laying the foundation here for our student-only event on Thursday, which is creating a braver and more inclusive school of public health. So feel free to put questions in the chat to everyone, just to me, just to Jeanette. Use that little raise hand feature, whatever works for you. And we're taking notes, so let's hear it. Yes, Sergio. Hi there.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Thank you very much for hosting the event. This is some really great information. This question mainly applies to the people, for those of us who field students' accommodation requests. Is there anything, speaking in the aggregate, is there anything that the school can do to improve its infrastructure, the kinds of, tools? Like, I'm interested in the walls that we hit and we really can't go further, or we can improve by, just sort of preemptively, working in these areas to sort of make this a little easier for our students. Technology, facilities, structure of the building, whatever, comes up. Is there something that we should be focusing on as a school to improve?
I think that's a great and huge and big question. And I think, again, part of having these conversations is opening that up for what do we prioritize? How do we prioritize? And how do we bubble this up to actually make that kind of change? I know a couple of things, and I don't want to put them on the spot, but we've got a couple of students who helped organize this who were brewing some pretty good ideas. And I think, of course, change can really happen bottom up, and especially with the power of students on our campus. But I think things like physical accessibility, we have a great campus, but we do have some limitations. But what is the difference between providing that universally designed space versus what is only required under the law? And I think what we're all here to sort of talk about and push the envelope is really going beyond. So I welcome anybody else to hop into this.
So Sergio, hi.
Hi.
Nice seeing you.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks for being here. So I don't have the answers. I know that I have decided to shift my way of thinking. So like throughout my walk in life, like from the moment I leave my home to the moment I come back, I'm always thinking, okay, as I'm working with people, hanging out with friends, having people over for dinner, what can I do to help others feel more included? What can I do how can I be more sensitive to others' needs? So when I'm at work, I'm more mindful, or like I say, everywhere, I'm just more mindful of how I think and what I say and how I say it. And so I think that's a start, but that's a personal decision, right? And then, of course, all the bigger changes, you need more people, you know, having this discussion like we're having now, of course, is a good start. We should continue to have these discussions moving forward. You know, we need to rally outside of, you know, 55 West 125th Street. You know, if we need to rally and make noise about something, then that's what we need to do. And that's how we'll eventually come to some positive changes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, Suzanne.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I get calls from students. I participated in one of the disability workshops last year, and I get calls from students who have, you know, neurobehavioral kinds of challenges. And I think we should have, and I really enjoy these conversations. We come up with plans and talk back and forth multiple times. I think we need to have a faculty list of people who welcome that kind of exchange, because one of my big points with the students that I've talked to this semester is that, you know, there's skill sets that they can acquire that are going to make themselves extremely marketable, and that people do there. I can help you identify some organizations that really welcome diversity in the workplace. It's not just about going to school. It's about thinking about your future. And I've been out in the field working for my whole career in back and forth between government and not-for-profits and academia. So I really want to talk to people and help them figure out where they want to land and how to get the skills to really make a good impression and land in the right place, in the right world that they want to live in. So I really hope that, you know, my name could be on a list. Other people should sign up to be on that list. It shouldn't be one or two people giving this kind of, you know, I have my own, every faculty member has advisees, and I talk to my advisees all the time. And this is just an extra little add-on to that, but an important one. And so I just want to find a way on the website for them to find us, and they choose us. We don't choose them. I don't want to be assigned someone. I would rather somebody, say, oh, she's an epidemiologist, I want to talk to her, you know, and she knows something about disability. So this is, you know, a way we can kind of expand how we're, you know, they're counselors, and that's great. That's wonderful. But it's not all about school. It's about your future too.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, agreed. And I think that's a fantastic idea. And I think that's like one easy step, throwing something up on the website. And I think you sparked something that I failed to mention, that we hope to actually provide on the website more robust resources, both within and externally from CUNY for students and faculty alike. But I think this kind of engagement is, yeah, like I said, it's literally putting a couple of things on our webpage that really would add to the community for sure. Thank you. Anybody else? If nobody has any comments, I'll take this opportunity just to a couple of reminders. Actually, next week is the CUNY Accessibility Conference, and if you haven't attended it before, it's an incredible wealth of information about what's going on at CUNY, and I think kind of echoing what we've been talking about today, like what's possible, what's impossible, what we need to push the envelope on. It's kind of too much. There's a lot, but I think just, you know, trying to attend one or two sessions is well worth your time. And I will, after I'm blabbing, I'll put that in the chat. And again, we'll follow up with some resources afterwards. I also want to plug that there was a Making Public Health Personal podcast by our own Jeanette that was dropped yesterday, and it's fantastic. Jeanette, again, congratulations. But it just gives you a little more insight into her work, her motivations, and the work that she's done to put this office together to what it is today. Paulo, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to ask if there's a possibility that that the school in itself can work with the building to try to see if we can install the automatic door openers, at least downstairs. Yesterday, I happened to notice somebody who was struggling in a wheelchair to get into the building. And I know, I guess, because we have the attendants downstairs, part of their role is to assist in that situation. But, you know, if there are a lot of people coming in or whatever the case may be, they may not always be at the ready to assist right away somebody with a need. So I just wonder if that's a conversation that we can perhaps start with the building, if it hasn't already started, to try to resolve that situation.
Thank you so much for bringing this up. And yes, this conversation has happened before, but I think we're hearing it a little. I mean, just this real world example that you just saw, that, you know, yes, the envelope really needs to be pushed on this. So thank you. Actually, Dr. Roberts, if you're still in the Zoom, if you want to speak to that at all.
I think you know, captured it pretty accurately. I think it, you know, is a building issue, and folks at CUNY SPH are certainly aware of it at the highest level. How that translates to, you know, change, you know, on the part of the building management is, you know, yet to be determined, but we can certainly continue to raise it. And I think the more we hear from members of our community, and I really just want to emphasize how much we saw this particular conversation a little different than what we did last year, which was, you know, a panel of, you know, speakers talking, you know, to, you know, their experiences and sharing a lot of, you know, invaluable information and expertise, but how important we think it is to build up a community of folks, as has been mentioned by Jeanette and also by Suzanne, to really have us, you know, what we're calling a braver space, not safe space, but brave space in which people are willing to be vulnerable enough to share what they are grappling with. And that's any one of us. That's a student, that's a staff person, that's a faculty member. You know, we are all, I think, touched by, you know, different aspects of the issue of disability, whether that's something someone has had all their life, something that is temporary, something that becomes chronic with age. So being able to really consider how we are able to, you know, support one another in meaningful ways, and to also change our structures, our practices, how we communicate with one another, the language we use, that reflects some of what we shared in the beginning by Mia Mingus, and really want to encourage what she calls access is love. And, you know, what clearer way to say that is not something we often talk about in public health or feel even comfortable, you know, considering a strategy, but to consider that it is really about creating the community that we want to be a part of, because it benefits all of us and makes public health more responsive to the communities that we serve, both internally and externally. So we're just so glad that you're here. We have some resources that I think are going to be dropped in the chat, you know, more about the Access is Love framework, the link to the full video, but more importantly, the invitation that will be facilitated by our students, in which, you know, we're very mindful of giving a forum and a brave space for our students to speak candidly with each other. It will be facilitated by two of our doctoral students. Yvonne is here, and I think Zaire is here also, although he has that wonderful image there that he represents from his workplace, I believe. But at any rate, the two of them have been on this planning committee from the beginning, and they're holding us accountable. And they're also hoping to create not just a one-time conversation, but an ongoing space that's created for our students to come together with each other, to continue to build that community, but for it to also be a community that leads to action, that holds us accountable as a school. And so I think what we wanted to do today was create the space for our entire community to come together and raise some of the questions, some of the concerns. And if this isn't the best way to do it, then to also share with us other ways that we might do that better. Where people can let us know what's working, but also what isn't working well for them.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts, for that. You sort of brought it back, brought it on back home. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I actually think something that you touched on echoes. I got a request to share anonymously a thought and question about how to create a system where students and employees don't need to present the official diagnosis and documentation in order to get an accommodation. And I think what this really speaks to is something that that I personally feel really strongly about in terms of providing universal access, so that we're not having to make these one-off accommodations, that we're not having to bring out potential stigma in the individual to self-disclose, but really to level that playing field from the get-go. And I see Sergio has his hand up, and maybe you're echoing the same sentiment, but
yeah. Well, on those latter points, yes, I share that, those goals too. Would love to see, like, a transcription videos, things like that, to be more, well, the technology is getting better and better by the year, but I think that, just having things that turned on, and easy to access those options, is always something that we should aspire to, for sure. My question is, do we have an evaluation mechanism for when we do accommodation requests? Do we know, how students actually feel about the whole process and the resolution? Do we do any evaluation?
May I answer? Hi, Jeanette. So the answer is no. And I'll tell you that it's something I've been thinking about for years. I always want to know what I'm doing wrong and what I can do to change that and do better. And I know there are students do complete surveys for faculty, right? And I don't know if they complete it for like other departments, but it's definitely something that I think we should have at the school. And that'll tell us, right? Like Dean Roberts said, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What do we need more of, or what do we need less of? So to answer your question, no, but maybe we should start working on that. Thank you.
And I think the flip side of that is actually asking, how's it going, faculty member, who is the person who's implementing that accommodation request? So I think, it's sort of a two-way street. Not sort of, it is. But thank you for bringing that up. So in our last couple minutes, anyone else? Am I missing anything in the chat? Anyone else to contribute to the conversation? Or Arthur or Sahana, I want to welcome you both if you're like, oh, wait, I forgot that one thing.
No, I think, thank you, Sarah, for, thinking about, and I just want to talk about a little bit about the question that Sergio brought up about evaluation. I think some of the things that have been happening have happened, and it's not because there's documented evaluation of the process, but it has come about because we have heard from students, we have heard from faculty and staff as to how our process works. And some of the steps and some of the processes that have been put in place have been in response to that. So for example, when Jeanette provides the faculty member with information or asks a student for particular documentation, I think, or doesn't ask them for a documentation, which is maybe not required for that particular accommodation. It's not like we are using a one size fits all for every request that we get. A lot of it, as I said, is done on a case-by-case basis. But you know, one of the things that we can certainly look at is UDL. Universal design is something that is critical to looking at syllabi, to looking at curriculum, and as well as in terms of workplace accommodations. It's very important to look at, you know, what are we providing to support our employees so that they don't have to come ask for that accommodation, but that, you know, some of it is built into what we provide to them already. So, you know, technology is, as you said, is you know, it's amazing what we can do, but how much of it do we have and how are we deploying it in terms of providing that to our students and to our employees? I think those are the questions that we need to really kind of look at in more in depth to see what's the impact on our students and our employees. But more particularly, I would say for our students, because there are so many needs that they have. And sometimes it's not easy to identify those needs or even to have them be expressed, or, you know, they don't come to our office to ask for that. But to be able to understand that, you know, there are some underlying basic needs that we can provide without anybody coming to ask for it, as you said. You know, you don't have to always disclose it. That is something that I think we should aim for. Definitely.
Or even anticipate some things, like, for instance, if we're recruiting faculty to, you know, come in for an interview, and you might have, you know, you might be in a position where the candidate is asking for assistive technology to give the audience questions, and we don't have that, you know, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that we looked at when we went, you know, remote, was the whole change in the interview and hiring process, because all of a sudden, even the people who were doing the interviews were faced with a different kind of environment, as was the applicant, and doing it on Zoom was not the same as sitting across the table. And how do we provide support for that kind of a change, notwithstanding that it could be a request for an accommodation, but just the very fact that we changed our environment for every, whether we needed it or not, is something that we had to be very mindful of. And that then becomes something that's standardized across everybody.
Thank you, Sarah.
May I just say really quickly that for this event, as far as we know the organizers, there wasn't anyone that needed sign language interpreting, but we have John here, right, and his colleague here anyway. So moving forward, right, if we can live in a world where it's just available, like you all said, that would be huge.
Right. Yes.
I think we have time for one more question, comment, and then we'll wrap up.
Can I jump in here, Sarah? So my name's Yvonne. I'm a doctoral student that was on the planning committee, but I also teach courses through SPH. And so I have a question that's kind of a twofold. So I always, since I started teaching, I've been trying to do universal accommodations that would benefit all students. And so I'd love to hear more from professors about how you like what types of universal accommodations you implement into your classes, and then what might be some ways that students could reach out to you to be able to ask for some of those accommodations. Just because like for me, I know I get nervous about asking for them, even if my professor's like super approachable and like very friendly, it still makes me nervous because I know we've talked about this before, but as somebody who's disabled, sometimes I feel like I shouldn't need these accommodations. And so it kind of makes it feel like, oh, I should just kind of tough it out. And I'm really trying to get over that. So I want to find different ways so that students don't have to ask for them who take my courses, but then also have the ability to feel like they can ask for accommodations, maybe anonymously. So I'd love to hear like any advice around that.
I just want to say, this is Suzanne. I teach epidemiology. My attitude is I take out of the syllabus anything that says that I won't accept late assignments. I take out all the negatives. I invite people to get in touch with me when they want. To me, that's an accommodation. If you want to get your assignment in late, if you want to take longer for your test, if you have to miss class for a reason, I just make myself available and chat with people. So that I don't care what the root cause is. Everybody's entitled to accommodations as far as I'm concerned. And some of them, I haven't yet had one that seemed illegitimate yet. So I'm pretty old and I've heard a lot, but they're always a good reason for people making a request. So I think we just need to tell faculty that you can't put that in your syllabus, that you don't accept late assignments and that you don't accept, requests. I've seen it in numerous syllabi, and I think that's not a good practice. We have to be responsive to the people we serve, and that's our students.
I was just going to chime in. Yvonne, thanks so much for that question. Suzanne, actually, in response to what you just said, I wanted to highlight that, there's been an effort among some folks at the school to make some recommendations for syllabus redesign that comes from this set of social justice syllabus redesign principles. And that's exactly one of the things that's discussed in that advice. So there is a faculty template that exists to try to help people make those changes to their syllabi. But Yvonne, I feel a little sheepish admitting this, but I'm not even sure what universal accommodations would mean beyond what Suzanne described. And I'm curious about the kinds of things that you're doing in your courses and what we can learn from you.
Yeah, so I'll self-disclose. I have ADHD. I was just diagnosed last year. And it's really kind of opened up my eyes to like, what are the things that are seen as like strange, that are things that I need to be able to respond and like be present in class. So when I first started teaching my course in the fall, one of the first things I said is, this is a very neurodivergent friendly space. If you need to get up, feel free to do that. If you need to go to the restroom, feel free to do that. If you have a fidget toy or something that you need to fidget with, or you need to draw or doodle, feel free to do that. I know you're still paying attention. I always take bio breaks. So there's always like a 10-minute break because classes tend to be very long. But I also tell people, if you need to get up for any reason, you can do that. Because for me, it's very difficult for me to sit still. I'm very restless on the inside because I don't have hyperactive ADHD. And so I tend to fidget a lot, like in my legs and stuff. And so that can be distracting for other students. So I try to sit in the back when I can. And then I also get up when I can. And I'll try to tell my professors, like, I sometimes have to get up, if it's distracting, I apologize, but I promise you I'm paying attention. But I found it really helpful when I was explicit to my students about that and saying, like, you don't have to ask me, like, these are kind of like the quote unquote rules of the classroom. It seemed like it helped students feel more comfortable, like just taking care of their needs. And because I didn't point anyone out, everyone was able to access and like take kind of advantage of like being able to get up when they were feeling restless. And I know all of our students, like myself, work. And so maybe they're just getting to class, and I would say, like, if you need to eat, feel free to eat. Like, this is not like a space where, you know, I don't want you starving. I get very hangry if I don't eat. But my ADHD also like makes me forget to eat. So sometimes I won't remember until I'm heading to class and I walk by the Whole Foods and I'm like, oh my God, I haven't eaten all day. Like, I need to grab something. So it's just like little things like that I know help me as a neurodivergent person, but also can be spread out to everyone, even if they're not neurodivergent. And it kind of helps everyone kind of gain access to universal accessibility.
Thank you so much for providing some concrete examples. It's really helpful.
Thank you for that fantastic dialogue. We were hoping this would happen, and it did. So thank you, Yvonne, for sparking that conversation. I want to be mindful of the time. We're just a hint after 4. I hate to cut it off, but this has been fantastic. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you to our speakers. Lynn, if you want to wrap it up for us, and bid you all adieu, and thank you again.
Sure. I just want to thank everyone for coming. Hope the students among us will join Yvonne and Zaire on Thursday, and that, you know, we will be following up with all of you to just keep in touch, share whatever resources, and to continue this dialogue, which we consider critical to our elevation as the CUNY School of Public Health. So thank you all for coming. It meant a lot to all of us on the planning committee.
Yes, thank you.
We know how busy you are.
Thank you.
Thank you all.